Good morning, and good morning, Senator.
Good
Today
morning,
is
Morgan.
May 16th, yes, and we have a lot to talk about. We just had the China visit with Trump. We were hoping for some kind of movement on either a peace deal or negotiations or some situations of trade deals between the U.S. and China itself. So we want to go ahead and jump into it. Some of the stuff on Iran war. We want to kind of basically center this whole discussion on, is the U.S. power fading as a result of the Iran war? So I want to go ahead and kick that off and send it to you, Senator. It's quite a a topic to dive into.
It is, and it's um, wars are funny things. I've always been a great believer in having a strong military and keeping it in your hip pocket, but not using it. And because the problem is that unexpected things can happen in war, and those can be bad things. And so even if it looks like you're in a posture that you can rough up the other side or whatever, you are much better if people just say, oh, this is really a powerful country. And because once you employ it, if it turns out that there is a, a, a flaw in your armor, then all of a sudden, so much of your strength dissipates because people are a little less apprehensive about challenging you, and this has happened here. And unfortunately, this isn't just some unknown chink in the armor, but something that a number of us who have watched this very carefully warned the administration that this thing was a disaster waiting to happen, and there's no benefit to the United States in attacking Iran. And so why take on these tremendous risks? So anyway, that's where we are right now. So we've seen the war unfold. It's gone on longer than President Trump expected. And we had Benjamin Netanyahu, who I view as a very sinister fellow. And he basically lied to the president. He convinced them that, as soon as we start dropping Israeli bombs and American bombs on their heads, they'll all say, hallelujah, we've been saved. They've come. And, yeah, sure, they killed my wife and they killed my children, but I'm all for it because now we're going to have whatever it is that we bring them. But in any event, it's been a disaster. So President Trump was very much on the spot with, what do we do with this tar baby now that we've grabbed hold of it and we can't seem to let go of it? And there was a lot of talk about the visit between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, who now China imports a very major portion of their oil from Iran. They're very reliant on Iran. They'd love to see the Strait of Hormuz open, but first and foremost, they want that oil because they've got to have it to run the industrial machine in China. So I think there was a feeling that, well, the Chinese need the oil. They need to be able to get it through the Strait of Hormuz. We want to open the Strait of Hormuz. Maybe if the United States and China both come together, we can put pressure, because if China says, look, we're just not going to buy any more Iranian oil, then boy, that puts Iran in a spot. I think that was the general thought. But that sort of ignores the fact that China does not have the option of saying, oh, we're not going to buy this oil because it's not respected by the United States. Um, China has to have oil. They buy immense amounts of oil from Russia. Uh, we've got sanctions on it. They buy it anyway. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they have to get whatever they can out of Iran. So anyway, so that's sort of the backdrop. They had the meeting with Trump and President Xi. Um, it was courteous. I suspect the two men uh, like one another reasonably well. They certainly don't have any personal animosity. But even though it was, generally courteous and diplomatically correct meeting, there was no joint statement made afterwards, which is a little bit unusual. Um, and I think it's really because the key issues were not really on the same sheet of music. China, from the outset, made it clear that U.S. policy on Taiwan is a very tense subject.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the foreign ministry said the Taiwan question is the most important issue in China-U.S. relations, and President Xi said that the two countries will have clashes and even conflicts if the United States doesn't handle the issue properly. Um, so this, we've got a long history. We had Nancy Pelosi lead a delegation.
It's true. Yeah. It's so long ago. It's like all these crazy events you forget.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, that was a really, really big thing for kind of stirring the pot. And
yeah. It was a deliberate move to raise tensions, and it did. It succeeded, and
mhm.
I'm sure that the delegation that went, they all benefited financially or through campaign contributions or one way or another. Um, so much. One of the flaws in our system or problems is that our system is reliant on campaign contributions. I don't know that there's anything we can do to get away from that in a free society. But the problem is that countries like Israel and sometimes China, sometimes Taiwan,
It's
they
true.
all have their lobbyists and they
Mhm.
all pay their money.
Yeah, I think but the Taiwan pivot I think is very important because I believe the the Chinese government, they are very intelligent and I'd be like very in tune to the foreign policy and the domestic policy of even of the America. We had veterans, I believe, sounding the alarm in 2025, the National Defense Authorization Act, of the allocation of funds to create these what they called like graveyard ships, these ships that were designed to kind of be sunk. So there were like this boost of arsenal to create these boats, and they suspected that it was in the attempt that we would go to war with China, because that would be kind of the inevitable what would ensue, given the fact of the distance between us and what would really take place as us trying to take over and stop China from absorbing Taiwan. So I thought that was very interesting because you and I both know you can't just make ships up at a night, one night, or a snap of a finger. These things take time. They ramp up, and we know that there's this bureaucratic body that has these agendas that sometimes, whether we like it or not, we have little say in, if they're stopped or not. Much like these wars, with Ukraine or what we're doing in Iran. A lot of these things are kind of put in the agenda long before we even are aware of them. So I thought I'm constantly reminded of that when those veterans were sounding alarms of that the Chinese government is also understanding what is happening. You say with the Strait of Hormuz, it's very important to China. It would be a big leg up if we got control of the Strait of Hormuz, much like the alliance between Venezuela and China. We've kind of severed that. So it seems like there's this connecting tide that we're actually trying to attack China as opposed to Venezuela solely or Iran solely. And that's just my kind of perspective on those events. And I would be surprised that the Chinese government is also acknowledging that kind of scenario as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you watch the diplomacy of China, it's very orderly. You don't tend to have big shocks and surprises. You don't have blustering. You don't have, it's very calm, very precise. Whereas ours is chaotic. We wake up one morning and Nancy Pelosi's taking a bunch of clowns over to rattle sabers, and we're running ships through the strait between Taiwan and the mainland of China, and just all of this erratic stuff that goes on. It's interesting, the contrast between what we do and what China does. And I think there was a time, the United States has always been rather erratic with its foreign policy, but not nearly to the extent of recent years. And it kind of started with George Bush, particularly George Bush Jr.
Yeah.
With the 9/11, whatever really was behind all of that, it was a great tragedy for the country. And probably the biggest tragedy is that it provided the justification for George Bush to begin this massive attack on the Middle East. And it's just been handed from president to president. And much of it driven by the desire of Israel to expand its territory and to enhance its power vis-a-vis its neighbors. Whenever Israel is able to create chaos within a neighboring country, it reduces that country's power, which in relative terms enhances Israel's power. So they have an interest in creating constant turmoil, bloodshed, and suffering among all of their neighbors. It's a dangerous thing, though, because sooner or later something may go wrong, and at that point you've got all of these neighbors who have been brutalized and exterminated and so forth, and they don't forget. So, in any event, back to the Trump trip.
Yeah.
They had they had this very high level business delegation with top leaders of major corporations, and I think everyone, particularly people interested in the stock market and so forth, there was this feeling that there would probably be a lot of really impressive trade agreements that would emerge from this. And so you had like the president of Boeing going over the one that they said, well, the head of NVIDIA is not going. And then at the last minute, President Trump got him to agree to go over. And NVIDIA is this enormously explosive, successful company that is basically powering the AI revolution, and it's worth $5 or $6 trillion now. A tremendous company. So the head of it, Jensen Huang, joined the delegation, And so there was this anticipation.
Mm-hmm.
When they left, there had been strong rumors that Boeing would be able to sell 500 of its jets. And the announcement that came out of it was, no, it wouldn't be 500. It would only be 200. That's an enormous amount of difference. And with NVIDIA, where all of the stockholders of NVIDIA were saying, oh, well, this is going to mean big new markets for for the NVIDIA chips, the AI chips. When they left, President Trump said that China had decided to produce its own chips, and it's not going to buy the chip. Now, NVIDIA wasn't selling its latest chips, which I'm personally glad to see that, because I think the AI is a great commercial advantage that we have, and I do think we ought to be competitive. I just don't think we ought to be killing each other to be competitive. We need to do it in a capitalistic fashion where you market a better product. And so I think if we had given away that advantage, it wouldn't have been a good thing, or even sold away that advantage. But NVIDIA was talking about the H200 chips, which are an earlier version, and Chinese said, no, we're going to make our own chips. So, and we'll see. It's easier said than done, but the Chinese are pretty good at producing things, and
yeah, all the phones and all. Yeah, they're I wouldn't count them out, kind of thing. So I think that's certainly interesting. Now, we spoke about this before, a few weeks ago, and probably even last week, if I can remember, is that the Strait of Hormuz doesn't just carry, oil and gas and petroleum, but all sorts of things that are now being put under pressure, and we're seeing a lot of spikes going on through that. Now, you sent me an article on the potatoes, how potato prices are spiking. Could you go into that a little further?
Yeah, this is interesting because it's one piece of information that sort of highlights it. This was in RT News, which I think I find to be a very reliable news source. It's connected with the Russian, not so much. Well, I don't know. I'm sure it has influence from the Russian government, but it's a pretty objective outlet. But in any event, they pointed out the fact that potato futures, that the contracts where you pay today to buy something at a certain price in the future, and so it sort of anticipates. You can buy potatoes at one price today, but the question is, okay, what does it cost to purchase supplies out in the future? And so there's been a tremendous spike upward in the cost of potatoes in the future. Now think about potatoes. When you think of potatoes, think of every McDonald's, every Wendy, every Burger King in the country, and of course in other countries, like in Germany, you have the pommes frites, Schnitzel mit pommes frites.
It's a staple.
It's a staple, yeah.
And it rose over 700%, which we have different. We spoke about this last week, which is propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. Vegetable glycerin, I think, comes from Myanmar, but propylene glycol, that's in everything. That's in your shampoo. That's in soap, and people kind of take it for granted, but that has gone up. Last time I checked, 200%. Its price. So you're having these basically these staple items that you don't really, mainly we take for granted, is spiking significantly in prices. And not only for us, but for the rest of the globe. And I think we had spoken about this, other shows, but when resources get under pressure, it's basically a pressure cooker for conflict to ensue, more and more intense conflict. So I think that's very important to note as well.
Yeah, I think we're beginning to see inflation come back on the scene, and there was excuse me, there was a sudden spike upward in inflation. The April Consumer Price Index went up to a 3-year high of 3.8%. Now that's basically 3.8% inflation, and the Fed has this 2% target that they try to get inflation down to 2%. Good luck on that, but it appears very likely that the Fed will start raising interest rates. Now, this has a lot of impact if interest rates begin to climb and inflation begins to take hold, as it might. You look at the massive investment in AI, one of the biggest capital investments in world history, and all of a sudden, if the cost of borrowing increases significantly, it really bites into how much stuff they can purchase. And for small businesses, like I know you have connections with the restaurant business,
Yeah.
and the margins are not tremendously high. Mm-hmm. And when the cost of labor and the cost of potatoes and the cost of everything else goes up, the next thing you see small restaurants closing down. You saw this during COVID.
Yeah.
There were untold thousands of small restaurants that went under and never to come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, even the prices as of right now, where we would say that we're not certainly feeling the immediate effects of what's, going on, they're continuing to rise, have been, ever since COVID, with, just the injection of money into our economy that wasn't really sustainable, throwing everything out of whack. You have a lot of companies who are still trying to recover, if not have already closed their doors, like in this past year, and those are from the ramifications of COVID. So it's kind of this snowball effect that we're going to see. I mean, it's very, very, I know for like in my personal capacity of what I know about, the diners and stuff like that, normally they do generally pretty well. Your American diners, they do pretty well during recessions and stuff, because they're not the fine dining, what people kind of pay top dollar to go to. It's something a little more feasible for their income, but who knows? I mean, if potatoes keep going up, or bacon, or all sorts of things, simple things that we take in our life that we take for granted, get to outrageous prices, we don't know what is to come. So it is an unsettling time of uncertainty.
Yeah. When I was in college, I worked at a just old classic factory in Webster, Massachusetts, and I worked two complete 40-hour shifts a week, and I would go in, I would clock in. Back then you had the IBM punch cards, and there you'd take your card from the wall, you'd go in line with all the other workers, you'd punch it into the machine, and then you'd put it in the appropriate place in the other rack. So that's the way you go back and forth. So I would do that in the morning and work. I was a utility boy, worked for minimum wage, which at the time was $1.15 an hour. And if you could get overtime, it was a big deal. And the people working in the factory were were poor. They were mostly first and second generation European immigrants. And so because you really couldn't make ends meet by working and getting one salary or one wage, people would get married very early, which was a healthy thing. It's the way that you could survive, as a husband and wife could pool their resources and get an apartment or something. But anyway, I'd go in the morning, I would punch in, work all day, and when everybody was punching out at night, because I was kind of a work lunatic, I was the only person in the factory who was authorized to give myself as much overtime as I wanted. And that's a plant of 600 people. I was very proud of that. So I would clock back in and I would work alone in the factory, pulling pallet jacks around and moving things out of the aisles and stuff. And but in between, when I had gone up the hill, I went to the diner. It was just a classic old-fashioned diner. It wasn't an imitation old-fashioned diner. It was an old-fashioned diner. And the food was good. The prices were fair. Service was nice. It was just comfortable, good people. And I'd just race up. I get the food so that I could work more, and I'd go back down and work another 40-hour a week shift. And I loved it. I actually got physically sick when I was leaving because I so fell in love with the factory and the movement of things through the plant, the people, and so forth. But in any event, I have a fondness in my heart.
It's a beautiful story. I know that was brought up from us talking about all these resources, but I know that we have other things that we want to speak about. With we mentioned it at the beginning of the show. This big country or this little country that has a lot of power in the U.S. Is still acting very naughty, given it's supposed to be a ceasefire with them in Lebanon. But as of this morning, they started striking southern Lebanon again. And it was supposed to be a 45-day ceasefire that was negotiated, I believe, with the U.S.'s help. And Israel is not abiding by that. And that has actually led to the Iranian government basically saying that we have little trust in diplomacy with the U.S. So could you kind of catch us up to speed there? We have, Israel's now striking Lebanon again.
Yes.
2 weeks ago, they had the 100 airstrikes in less than 20 minutes, and it killed almost, over 100 people, mainly civilians. Which is a textbook terror attack. And we see that maybe this will be a new start of that.
Yeah, this is a resumption of the Israeli terror bombing campaign, in which what they do, they like to use these 2,000-pound bombs. And I may have mentioned before, I once employed 2,000-pound bombs. I was a forward air controller with the Marines. I flew the first half of my time in Vietnam. The second half, I was an air controller with the 1st Marine Division. And usually we would drop 250, 500-pound bombs. We dropped napalm and so forth. But the biggest were the 2,000-pound bombs. And a 2,000-pound bomb will make a crater roughly, well, I would say probably twice the Earth removed of a large swimming pool, not like an Olympic pool, but just a good sized swimming pool. And the Israelis used them to destroy entire apartment complexes and exterminate all the human life within those complexes. They don't care whether it's women, children, men, combatants, children, doesn't matter. And so the Israelis now, they called a ceasefire, and then immediately, they just continue fighting in their ceasefires. And Hezbollah, to its credit, I think, said, "Okay, we're not gonna play this game where we just sit on our hands while they just murder the people in Lebanon. We're going to fight back." And so they have, and they've been using these drones that are optically guided. They have basically, there's a very fine strand of optical cable, and they can actually go several miles on this, and there's no electronic signal emitted, so that they're extremely hard to intercept. And they've been knocking out Israeli tanks and command posts and so forth. Well, the Israelis, their goal, they've had, I think, 5 major invasions of Lebanon over the years, which is why Hezbollah even exists as a military force. They defend the border against the attacks from the Israelis. And this time, Israel said, we're gonna take part of this land, and we're gonna force out all of the people. Now, the people that they're forcing out right at this time are predominantly Christians. Now, Americans are supposed to know that the Israelis are fighting and exterminating Christians. We talk about Hezbollah and this and that and all of these kind of exotic Muslim names. Well, not only are they brutalizing their Muslim neighbors, but really since the inception of the creation of Israel in 1948, they have been attacking Christians. And, in this case, they have singled out 5 villages in southern Lebanon, and they've ordered the population to evacuate before they begin to attack. They say, "Oh, well, before our attacks on Hezbollah." Baloney. It's their attacks on all human life within those 5 villages. The villages are near the city of Tyre, and it's very interesting because the IDF is systematically purging Christians along with the minority of Muslims that are there, and they're doing it from towns in Lebanon where Christianity first took root. And they intend to erase Christian communities that were established 2,000 years ago by the ministry of Jesus himself. The first Gentiles that Jesus preached to were enormous numbers of people who traveled from the city of Tyre and its sister city of Sidon, and they came to listen to Jesus preaching and to see the miracle of his healings. And so Tyre became a stronghold of Christianity. The people from Tyre were very receptive to the message of Jesus Christ, and they Christianized Tyre as early as any place on earth was Christianized. But the Jewish Sanhedrin are talked about in the Bible. The Sanhedrin were the governing authorities, the Jewish governing authorities in this region from Jerusalem and surrounding areas, and they were very brutal. They were very sinister and underhanded. There was a very evil man named Caiaphas who orchestrated the crucifixion of Jesus, and he had his personnel go out and arrest Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. and it was Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin who paid Judas the 30 pieces of silver to betray Jesus. So, in some sense, you can almost see the shadow of the Sanhedrin, the ancient Sanhedrin, with Benjamin Netanyahu and some of the things that are going on with the authorities in Israel. So it's one of these odd things that because of the influence of pro-Israel forces on the U.S. media, we're not allowed to know that Christians are under attack. We're told, it's just those Muslims with those funny names. No, it's Christians, it's Muslims, it's just any people who stand in the way of these folks.
Yeah, we saw the image of them desecrating Virgin Mary statue. Apparently, they've been caught doing the same. Granted, maybe not as bad as chopping the head off, but this is still kind of just as an affront to the religion and the church and the holy place that they are claiming to be some terrorist land that they have to level to the ground. So this story came out, this picture of an Israeli IDF soldier, and he's placing a cigarette in the statue of Virgin Mary's mouth. He has one himself, just making a joke out of it. So, tell us more about this. There was some events that transpired where, we'll speak about it, how Israel likes to save face and act like that's not their culture, or how their soldiers conduct themselves. And so I just want to go ahead and pass the story to you.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is in a Christian village named Debel, Debel, and so here we've got a member of the Israeli Defense Force, and he is mocking the Virgin Mary, and just making a comedy of it, making a farce of it. And what is interesting about this is that this is the same Christian village that was ravaged by Israeli forces 2 weeks ago, and they took down a large crucifix image of Jesus on the cross that was there on the street for everyone to see. It's a very deeply religious, very deeply Christian town, and so when the crucifix of Jesus was brought down, and then they were sledgehammering or use I don't know whether it's an axe or a sledgehammer, but they were chopping at the head of Jesus. Israeli defense soldiers, and one of them is photographing so that they can send it back home and laugh about, here's what we did to these Christians, and it was a big deal. When the sledgehammering took place, it got publicized in Europe. European Christians were really outraged. The Vatican weighed in. And when that happened, it embarrassed Netanyahu, because this deep-seated hatred towards Christians is not supposed to be allowed to ever bubble up, and it had bubbled up. So Netanyahu said, "Well, we're going to take action, and we're going to put guys in jail or something." And there are indications, although I could never get to the bottom of it, but there was some sort of punishment being meted out to them. And you would think that would send a clear message throughout the IDF that, hey, you better stop doing this in ways where people can see it. If you're going to do it, go ahead and hide it. So here, the fact that it was the same village, which means it's the same military group. Now, I don't know why somebody hasn't relieved the commander of the IDF and maybe relieve the minister of defense or something and just fire him. But they wanted to do a little slap on the hand. So the guys, messing with the Virgin Mary, they're going to get. They say one of them gets 2 weeks in jail, one of them gets 3 weeks. And I can imagine the jail is going to be a wink and a nod.
Mm-hmm. Because this is a common occurrence. They did the same thing. This horrible and horrendous story of them, of IDF soldiers being caught on camera, sexually assaulting an prisoner. I don't know if we remember that, so much so that the man had to go to the hospital. One of the men, I believe he was a doctor, died from this form of torture. But you had the Israeli government playing face.
What was done to him?
He was had stuff inserted in him.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, and it was this big story. It was caught on camera. And the man had to be hospitalized for rectal tears. Another, I believe it was a doctor who had died in that fashion. So it wasn't just this one-off occurrence. The Israeli government said, okay, we're going to prosecute these men. And they ended up prosecuting them. They're no longer in jail. They're actually doing media tours now. The woman who ended up releasing the film to the media, which it was CCTV camera of the jail. She saw it and was horrified by the actions. Legally, she's not allowed to do that, but it's more of a whistleblowing effort. She is being prosecuted to the fullest extent. So that is kind of just encapsulates the culture that is kind of pervasive in Israel at this moment. So much so that, like you said, you release these men under their command. I think it's a bigger issue than that. I believe it's more entrenched than you reprimand one commander or one general. I believe it's there's a great article that I believe The Guardian did where they interviewed a lot of the lower ranking as IDF soldiers that were horrified at what they had done in Gaza, saying that they had killed children, that they had bombed a father with his little girl. They were, trying to grapple with what they had done. They talked about this top-down culture of glorifying, and you get kind of the rise within the ranks if you are able to suppress kind of what you've done and say like, oh, all these people are terrorists. This is what needs to be done, and so I found that to be a very interesting insight into how the issue is a lot larger than just this one person allowing this to happen. Or
this is a part of Israeli culture, and I'm not saying that all Israelis ascribe to it. Mm-hmm. Those in power today very much ascribe to it. They just have absolute disdain for the law of warfare. They do things like deliberately targeting all medical facilities so that people can't be treated for breast cancer. They can't be treated for urinary problems where the men, if they don't have a prostate operation, they can't normally urinate anymore and they just die. And they deliberately just exterminate all of the medical people, all of the medical facilities, so that people just die of ordinary sickness and disease that we are accustomed to treating normally. Just yesterday, there was some outrage because the Israelis had targeted medics who were treating injured people. And they, apparently they knew that they were medical personnel, and they targeted and killed them. This is just one of 1,000 similar incidents where they have they've destroyed big churches or big hospitals, small clinics. They target ambulances and just anywhere they can find medical facilities, they go after them. Likewise, they go after churches. They just last night they bombed a synagogue in the West Bank, the occupied West Bank. And this is the settlers, the Jewish settlers who are certainly, I can't imagine that anything the Nazis did was worse than what the Jewish settlers are doing in the West Bank, where, we reported just recently about how they zip tied the penis of a man. They stripped all of the men, women, little children, old people. They pushed them around. They brutalized them, and they dragged him to where he thought he was going to die, and then they stole their entire flock of sheep because he was a shepherd, and they stole all of the wedding rings, the personal belongings, just thieved everything. It was a group of 20 Jewish settlers who came in just because it is Israel's policy is to drive the owners of the property in the West Bank off of their lands, and to do it through criminal action that's condoned, that is never punished. And I don't know if the Nazis did worse things. I'd like to know. I can't recall them zip tying anyone's penis, but who knows? So.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to note that the Israeli settlers are emboldened by the IDF, because the IDF has to somewhat have this veneer of we're not engaging in these illegal actions directly. But there are so many instances. There was one, a great journalist named Jasper. His last name is leaving my mind at the moment, but he witnessed one of these attacks. They went to an olive grove to harvest, and were led by the IDF. The IDF said they would give them safe passage, but the IDF essentially led them into a trap with dozens and dozens of Israeli settlers armed with bats, and they ended up severely hurting an elderly woman who was just there to pick olive trees. And he had captured the whole thing on film. Their car was completely destroyed by the end of it. And normally the Israeli settlers have some reservations about attacking American citizens. In recent time, it hasn't been that way. We know that there was one man that was killed earlier this year, an American citizen, and his younger cousin ended up being jailed by Israel for over 6 months. He was released. He was a 16-year-old boy. He ended up getting scabies and lost a significant amount of weight in these prisons. He witnessed one of the elder. It was a prison that was dedicated to children. Israel is the only country that in the entire globe that prosecutes children under military law. And he witnessed another child die in front of him from illness that would have been easily preventable if he had just regular medical attention.
Yeah, the brutality is really beyond anything that Americans would possibly imagine, and it's only because of the severe censorship of the media in this country that these things are hidden from the public. Fortunately, in Europe, this understanding of what's going on is a little more widespread, and the EU has agreed to place sanctions on violent Israeli settlers. France's Foreign Minister Jean-Noel Barrot said the EU was sanctioning the main Israeli organizations guilty of supporting extremist and violent colonization of the West Bank, as well as punishing the leaders. This is a first. The idea that any of the criminal activities being taken by Israelis would be sanctioned by, by the West. I think it's a good sign because somehow I can't imagine that this is going to help Israel when you are committing such genocide and so forth, and you think that you're immune because you've got the United States that's going to stand up and shield you from responsibility for the horrors that you're inflicting on your neighbors. I just think that's a very risky domestic policy for that country, and it does not bode well for the future of Israel that they have just been so vicious in their treatment of their neighbors.
Yeah, I think my quarrel with the EU's sanctions on these Israeli settlers is they're targeted individuals, and they are still cannot bring themselves to sanction probably the most influential characters, which is Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. These individuals rally up the crowd. They're probably the most radical in the Likud faction of these people don't belong here. I own their land. Ben-Gvir is the famous one who now it's legal to hang and execute these Palestinian prisoners that I would not say that they have gotten a fair trial. But he wore a golden noose pin to the celebration of this law passing. His wife then, a few weeks later, I think it was after the first session of executions, gave him a cake with a noose on it. They all were, celebrating the murder of people that I believe did not rightfully have a fair trial or were rightfully accused of the crimes to be then placed for death. So that is who Ben-Gvir is, and he is left out of these EU sanctions, which I find very telling. It seems like, the small guy that is committing these violent acts that really does no engagement with EU, products, and it might not affect him like it would affect a Ben-Gvir or a Smotrich. So I found that very interesting and telling within this article, and I wish the EU. Hopefully, I wish the U.S., but I wish the EU, given this action, would have had more bite to it and actually would have gone through the top guys that really push for this culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's sad for the great number of Jewish Americans and I'm sure Israeli Jews too, ones who are not of this ilk that is so brutal. But I think I was very impressed by the fact that when there were marches held against what was going on in Gaza, that they were held in Washington D.C. and they were organized by prominent Jewish individuals and Jewish organizations, and I just found that to be very heartening to know that there are lots of very good people who don't accept this kind of misbehavior. And if ever we could get to a situation where the United States would stop giving such unquestioning support to whatever Israel does, I think it would invigorate the good elements, both in the United States and also in Israel itself, to where they might be able to restore a more civilized sort of government there than they have today. So there's hope. There's always hope, and hope for reform in Israel, and so we'll see what happens. But right now, I think we're at this point with the Iran war, and of course, Lebanon is a big part of it. I think that was the big incentive for Israel to start the war against Iran, was this attempt to purge the indigenous inhabitants of Lebanon and steal their property. I think that was one of the principal goals of this thing from the outset.
And get us there to create instability so they could, I completely agree. Well, I know that we are at the end of the show. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I want to encourage everybody to like and share and follow us, and tune in next week to Focus on the News. Thank you, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Morgan.